Welcome into the 247 Sports College Football Show on CBS Sports Network. I'm Emily Proud, coming to you from our 247 Sports studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Friends, we made it. Week 1 of college football is here, which means a full slate of matchups on Saturday. We had some games last night. There's a Big Ten SEC showdown on Sunday and more action Monday. We have a lot to get to, so here is what's on tap for today's show. Josh Pate catches up with Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht. We'll go to the Shoe to preview the CBS Game of the Week between the Buckeyes and Zips. Plus, our network of team site reporters across the country will tell you who's on campus this weekend as it pertains to big-time prospects. And the authors of The Price join us for a behind-the-scenes look at what it takes to win in college football's era of chaos. But let's start here. Our 247 Sports national college football analyst, Brad Crawford, has his first edition of his projection of the 12-team playoff. He has Ohio State, Georgia, Miami, and Utah as the top 4 seeds and conference champs. Also Texas, Oregon, Ole Miss, Alabama, next 4 seeds. He has Liberty as the G5 representative. Now here to welcome on Brad Crawford. He's going to walk us through some of those games of consequence as it pertains to the college football playoff race. And Brad, let's start with Clemson versus Georgia. You have the Bulldogs in right now, but how would a Clemson win shake things up?
It would create chaos after week 1. Huge game to kick off the season for both teams, but I think it holds more significance for Georgia given the rest of the slate. They're the number 1 team in the country preseason in a top 25 loaded SEC, and this is Kirby Smart's toughest regular season schedule of his tenure. It really needs to start with a win in Atlanta as a double-digit favorite against a Clemson team that may have some questions.
Well, chaos is what we are all rooting for. Let's go to Notre Dame at Texas A&M. The Fighting Irish, they're in as the 10 seed in your projected bracket, but there's a chance that this could be the only game all season long that they're an underdog. So how crucial is a win in this opener?
Very important for both teams, but it's going to be difficult for the Irish to make the expanded playoff if they lose in College Station. Reason being, Notre Dame's only other games against top 25 teams this season right now are Florida State, who might not be ranked by the time the Irish play the Noles, and Southern Cal at the end of the season. So this is a barometer game for the committee. I'm interested in seeing if Texas A&M's defensive line dominates Notre Dame's freshman-laden O-line. 100,000 plus in Kyle Field, primetime atmosphere. Irish are starting 2 freshmen up there, so it's a tough assignment for Notre Dame in this opener, but it's 2 teams, top 20, very important.
You mentioned USC as a future opponent of Notre Dame. They play LSU on Sunday. Neither of these teams is in your current playoff field, so how could this game potentially affect the bracket?
Yeah, all the noise in the offseason associated with Lincoln Riley, maybe losing a step ahead of this season, his first in the Big Ten at USC. And then Brian Kelly, he's lost back-to-back season openers. LSU hasn't won an opening game since 2019. So the winner of this game probably pushes up closer to the top 10. Obviously, a loaded slate left for the Trojans and Tigers, but it's a huge game in Las Vegas. 2 new defensive coordinators en route as well. So USC, LSU, I'm expecting a shootout there.
Definitely uncharted territory talking about the playoff in week 1. But Brad, we're here. We officially have college football. What are you looking forward to most this weekend?
Yeah, thank goodness, right? The 3 ranked matchups that we've talked about are huge. I'm also looking forward to seeing, Colorado on Thursday night, see what Coach Prime has in his second season. And then Alabama, first-year coach Kalen DeBoer plays Saturday night against Western Kentucky, huge favorite. I want to see if Jalen Milroe has developed into that Heisman quarterback that a lot of us think he can be.
We'll be tracking the playoff. We'll be tracking the Heisman Trophy race. A lot to track. We know you'll be all over it. Brad, thank you so much for coming on this week, and we look forward to talking to you throughout the season. You can check out more of his work at 247sports.com. He'll be updating this projected playoff bracket all season long, so check back for week-to-week changes. Now, we are not done talking playoff. The guys from Unfiltered with Carl Reed and Smoke Dixon walk us through some under-the-radar teams. Carl?
Thanks, Emily. Smoke, let's get it in.
I'm going to go right off the top rope. You know I like jumping in that water. I don't put my toes in or nothing. I'm going straight in. The Utah Utes, Kyle Whittingham. First and foremost, one of the better coaches out there, if not the best coach, top to bottom, from what he has out there to Utah and what he's done in the last decade. All he's done is beat a lot of good teams. Wherever you show up, he wins. But one thing that you know with this team making the playoffs, they're going to play physical defense. They lost Jonah Ellis, their pass rusher, last year to the NFL. But every year, don't they just show up and play and find somebody out there and develop them into being a good football player?
Absolutely.
Word on the block is Cam Rising is coming back, the leader of that team. And when you have the leader of the team coming back, anything can happen. And his favorite target, Mr. Keithy, he'll be back too to catch those dirty balls across the middle, convert third downs, score in the red zone. Dark horse, going in, this is a team that you don't want to play with when they get into the playoffs.
I'm going to tell you right now. I'm going to go with the University of Missouri.
Shocker.
Eli Drinkwitz, 11 wins last year. Missouri turns back. Top offensive producer. Luther Burden surrounded by Theo Wise and Mookie Cooper. But everybody talks about Luther. Brady Cook, the quarterback, is also back. Missouri has rebuilt their team in the trenches. Transfers like Caden Green, Marcus Bryant, and incoming freshman Williams Nemeri on the defensive line. Mizzou is stout in the trenches, which you'll need for SEC play. They do have a favorable schedule, except that one game when they go down there and play against your Crimson Tide.
I'm just shocked that you just said that off the top of your head. How long did it take for you to come up with Missouri?
2 seconds.
Well, you know what? Under the radar, Tim, I'll go with another one. Tennessee. Shocking to you. But here's what they can do. They can score a bunch of points. They can make you play the way they want you to play instead of speeding up the game. Schedule's not that tough, Reed. And they can get it done. That's my another surprise. And Nico, real deal.
My next surprise is the University of Arizona, led by quarterback Noah Fafita, who decided to stay along with his top 10 receiver, Big T Mac. Have you seen the catches on social media from T Mac? One hand, Odell Beckham style. Listen, the University of Arizona, do not be surprised if they push their way in the playoffs. They have explosion on the offensive side of the football. The University of Arizona is a team that everybody must keep their eyes on in college football this year. And they've also added some key pieces through the transfer portal. Great coaching staff at the University of Arizona. They're moving into the Big 12, and they have made their mark in the recruiting process, dominating the West Coast, also recruiting California. I love Arizona. Back to you, Emily.
Thank you both. You can check out 247 Sports Unfiltered with Carl Reed and Smoke Dixon on Tuesdays and Thursdays on the 247 Sports YouTube page. The CBS Game of the Week takes us to Ohio. A Buckeye breakdown is ahead. Plus, our Josh Pate talks with Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht. How does he balance being the face of a program in a sport that's unstable, to say the least? You're watching 247 Sports College Football Show.
That time of year, kickoff right around the corner. Every team about to be in action. Iowa State, no different. Quarterback Rocco Becht joining us from Ames, Iowa. I'm ready to go, man. Like, I look at the Big 12, and I look at Iowa State, and I think they got just as good a shot as anyone else up there, but I'm not on the field with you at camp every day. So take me through spring, take me through fall. Like, what's the vibe around that team right now?
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate you having me on. So going into the fall, there's so much excitement going on. I feel like the confidence level was high with everybody coming back. We were super stoked for the season. And I felt like Coach Campbell put us in a lot of situations during this fall camp to get us ready and prepared for this season coming into week one. So excitement is high, confidence is high, and I think we're ready for week one.
A lot of people know the name Matt Campbell. They know head coach at Iowa State. Like, fans have watched him from afar. Almost no one's gotten to play for him, though. You get to play for him. You're his quarterback. So take folks inside the program. What's it like playing for him? And if you had to describe him, like a scouting report of your head coach, what would it look like?
Yeah, Coach Campbell, he's awesome. He's really the big reason why I came here. He doesn't just continue to focus on football. He does have a life outside of football, and he does care about us outside of football. And I felt like that was the biggest thing for me, just his family, how involved they are with this team, how involved he is with, our families. And so that was the biggest thing for me. But, in the facility, he's a hard-nosed guy. He'll tell you straight. He'll be honest with you. And that's what I love about him. I don't want a coach tell me lies, tell me that, what I did that day is good. I want him telling me the wrong things I did and to help me prepare for, that next practice or that next game. And so I feel like he's done a good job of that with me and this whole team. And, no matter if you're a walk-on or a scholarship guy, he treats you like the same dude. And so that's also, just another thing to add on to and why I love about him. So he's awesome.
Hey, you grew up with a dad who played the game at a high level, coaches the game, so you probably had a version of that already growing up. Not every guy has a version of that. And so I got to imagine, especially if I'm a quarterback, so I'm supposed to wear that C on my chest anyway, I look around my locker room sometimes and maybe everyone doesn't take coaching. Maybe everyone doesn't take hard coaching well. How important is it? Like, how important do you feel it is, especially with the younger guys, to make sure they understand how to process that feedback? It's not someone hating on you. It's someone trying to make you get better.
Exactly. You said it perfectly. I mean, my dad growing up, he was always hard on me, but, I knew for a fact that he was just helping me, get better and preparing me for these moments. And, everybody's going to have a coach like that in college, in high school, maybe in Pop Warner, depending on what team you play on, the coaches you have. But they're just preparing you for, the future and helping you get better. They're not downing you. They're not making you feel worse about yourself, but they want to help you prepare yourself and come back that next day and ready for those situations and helping you, succeed in life.
Talking about Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht here. I got to be honest with you, man. When you guys came on at the end of last season, everyone put the spotlight on you, and all of a sudden you're at the forefront of a lot of these conversations, and then you hear these rumors, and you look at all these dudes in the transfer portal, and you hear about these big offers behind the scenes they're getting. I heard a lot of those rumblings about your name, and yet you're sitting right there in Ames, Iowa, just like you were at the end of last year. Why are you there, and what was that process like behind the scenes for you from the end of last year until this point?
Yeah, I felt like for me, knowing that everybody was coming back, I have the guys on the outside, Jalen Noah and Jaden Higgins, and I've got a couple, just guys that entered from the transfer portal. And I've got a dog stacked up running back room with, as well as, an All-American freshman tight end and Ben Bramer. Just everybody coming back on the offensive line as well. I didn't feel like there was a need for me to leave. All that money and all that talk, that's not really about me. I just want to win games and, help a program win just the Big 12 championship. And that's why I came back because I do feel like we have the parts to go and win a Big 12 championship. We just got to put everything together and hit on the precision and detail, week in and week out, and just, focus on one game and take a dub every single week.
Is there somewhere you look for, you could call it inspiration or guidance, whatever you want to, maybe beyond coaches, beyond family? Are there examples? Like some guys will look at other athletes. Some guys will look at other teams in years past. Wherever you draw it from, where do you draw on proper place to get my mentality and proper place to make sure I'm wired the right way from?
I feel like that comes from the coaches and the guys and the people that are around you. I was lucky enough to grow up in a household where my dad and my mom, they helped me grow up that way, just having that mental capacity and just having the main thought of just train of thought just throughout my life. And so I feel like that's prepared me for what I've gone through here. And just the people that I have around me, they put me through situations and, in practice and off the field and, in the facility where, I got to own up to my mistakes and, just continuing to succeed. And so I feel like that, like you said, just having that mental capacity is huge for me. And I feel like that's just a reason where I am right today.
Every year, early to mid-August, everyone goes and buys their preview magazine. Everyone starts to brush up on who's returning. And you guys are right up there near the top of the country in returning production. Sometimes that means that teams take a big leap forward. Michigan did that last year, for example. Other times teams disappoint and you're like, all these returning starters, but it kind of plateaued and it even regressed a little bit. What specific measures do you take and do you guys collectively take to make sure not only are we coming back, but collectively we're going to be better than we were last year? Like, how do you specifically make sure that happens?
Yeah, that's everybody's mindset, is to be better than last year. And I'm glad that you said that because Coach Campbell does hit on that a lot. There are teams who return a lot of starters, just like, we kind of did in 2021. And, they didn't live up to the hype that was, just around them. And then there's teams where they do live up to the hype. And so, but they don't live up to the hype because they did the same thing as what they did last year. It's because they continued to do what they did, but at a better and, greater stamina. And so that's what we want to do. I feel like we do have the guys in the right mental state to do that. We're mature enough. This team is mature enough. And I feel like we do have the team to just continue to be greater at everything we do, and the precision and the detail. That's huge for us going into this season. And so I do feel like we have been put in a place where there is a lot of talk about how we may come back and just not succeed to those expectations. But at the end of the day, we're, blocking that out, and we're playing our game. And our game is to continually do things right, take care of the ball, and, focus on one game at a time.
If I wake up any given morning, I may look at my calendar and I may have a contract negotiation with an agent at 9, and I may have a speaking engagement at 11:30, and then I've got a meeting at 1 or 2, and by the way, I've got to do a show. I've got to do my job that night. But that's in like the far down the road adult world, or at least it used to be. But now if you're a college football player, especially if you're a college football quarterback, your schedule starts to kind of look like that. And especially at the quarterback position, you're in demand. There are avenues at your disposal because of NIL that didn't used to be there. And yet the only way to maintain your value is to put blinders on and to stay focused. So how do you balance all that? Especially because none of you at the college level have ever been through this before. It's the first time for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, from, when I wake up to when I go to bed, it's dark. And so I don't really leave this facility unless I have to go to class during the afternoon. But other than that, when we have a certain time set for a meeting, us quarterbacks and, sometimes the receivers are in there before that certain time. And so our meetings start earlier than that regular start time. And so it's an all-day thing. And especially to add school on top of it, we're working 2 jobs, not only me, but this whole team. And so that's just preparing for that is tough. But I feel like having the ability with me going into my 3rd year, just getting into a rhythm, having a routine, and having a schedule is huge. And so that's what's helped me over these past 3 years, and just continuing to do that, and just not listen to the outside noise, because if you do that, then you will get off course, you will get off schedule, and it will hurt you in the long run.
Well, that was just a taste of their great conversation. You can watch the full thing on the 247 Sports YouTube page. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing. It's the wild, wild west. That is how college football is talked about these days. So we bring in the guys who wrote the book on all that chaos to discuss what they learned and what's next for the sport. Stay with us. Welcome back into the 247 Sports College Football Show. If you're looking for a book to get you ready for the season or to read one throughout the season, you can check out The Price, which was written by these 2 wonderful people who are joining us here on the show. A warm welcome to New York Times bestselling author Armen Keteyian and national college football reporter for CBS and 247 Sports, John Talty. I want your opinion on, or both of your opinion on this, but I'll start with John. I mean, it's not a well-kept secret that the sport is a little chaotic right now. You've written about it extensively. College football fans are well aware of this drama, but why does this particular chapter of college football history need an entire book to properly tell it?
I think because it's never been more chaotic. There have been periods of tremendous change, but we have not seen the amount of change that we've had over the last couple of years ever in college football. And we heard that from people who have been in the game 50, 60 years. So we knew that there was something here. And I think one of the big things that we know a lot has happened within the game, but I don't know that anybody has necessarily explained in full extent the human toll of all these changes. And that's something that I know Armen and I really wanted to dig into. It's one thing to say that NIL and transfer portal have changed the game, but I think to show how it's actually impacted players and coaches and administrators and all these other people that care about the sport so much just felt perfect for a book. And that, I think is what excited Armen and I so much about trying to do this project.
Yeah, for me, Emily, it was back in 2013, I did a book with Jeff Benedict called The System, which was a deep dive into then the sort of the chaotic state of big-time college football. And there was skyrocketing coaching salaries, there was realignment. But honestly, that was child's play compared to what we're dealing with now in terms of the college football playoff. You add in NIL, you add in the portal, You add in things that we talk about in the books, particularly with the destruction of the Pac-12, with just wanton greed and self-interest because everybody's worried about what's going to happen to them because there's no clear vision as to where the sport is going off the field. So for me, I had never worked with John before. I knew of John. I had never worked with him. And I'm going to say this, I've said it before, but he kind of reminds me of a young me. He's very relentless. He's very careful. He has great contacts within the SEC and around the country. And it just felt right. It's big, it's sweeping, it's behind the scenes. It's the kind of stuff I like to do. And John does as well. So I think it was a great partnership in this book.
I love that you
Did I say what I was supposed to say, John, for you? Is that right? I'm sorry.
Yeah, did that work? Checks in the mail?
Yeah, he's already getting paid. No, we got him.
No, you're good. I love the friendship between you two. It was interesting to learn that you hadn't worked together on a book just because, you know, the media tour that you're on right now, you both have just been so complimentary of each other. And I think that's the reason we have such a great book here to read in the price. Armen, you guys did 200 plus interviews for this book from college football folks all across the country and in so many different landscapes. If you had to pick, what's maybe one anecdote that just made your jaw drop?
Oh, I think, well, there's a lot. I mean, I think John had what he had at Maryland when, you know, Talia Tagovailoa goes to Mike Loxley right before a bowl game and says, really influenced by his father, and says, you know, if I don't get $50,000 from the program, I'm not going to play in the bowl game. It didn't shock me because that's kind of where things were headed. But for me, personally, I got to know Julian Sayin, great quarterback out of Carlsbad High School in California. The only reason he goes to Alabama is because of a relationship that he had formed with Nick Saban. He believes, and Nick made him believe or led him to believe, that he would be the next great quarterback in a line of great quarterbacks in Tuscaloosa. And then Julian, his first day in classes, it's 3 o'clock. He has his first class at 4 o'clock. He walks into the team meeting at 4:05. Nick Saban has retired as the head football coach at Alabama. If one thing, and then Julian now, for reasons which are in the book, is now at Ohio State. But if there's one thing that sort of, to me, symbolized the chaotic state of big-time college football, it was that moment. It just out of the blue. And I've known Nick dating back to his days with the Miami Dolphins. But the heartbreaking moment for Julian when he realizes that the floor just dropped out from underneath him in that team meeting room, now what? And that is playing out, as we show in the book, time and time and time again in various programs around the country.
Yeah, I guess, you know, for me,
John, how about for you?
Armen picked one from my reporting. So, you know, because of our great friendship here, I'll pick one from his. You know, I think one of the ones that certainly jumped out to me is, you know, we have a chapter that was, you know, based on Armen's reporting about the NCAA enforcement and how they're trying to get their arms around this, you know, in some ways uncontrollable, unenforceable world, and kind of all that they're dealing with and fighting up against. And you know, Armen got a chance to talk to a senior NCAA investigator who specializes in football and talking about money. And that's always one of those things for what we do that's really hard to pin down. And he said, based on, you know, what they heard in their investigation, the top number that they heard for a single year for a quarterback was $8 million, which is just an insane number. And, you know, whether that number is true or not, you know, I can't say. But just even hearing that number, that's where the NCAA, that's what they were hearing, was kind of mind-blowing for me, and, you know, shows just some of the money that's really flown into the sport the last couple of years.
That's a perfect segue to my next question, because, John, you know this better than anyone. We focus heavily on recruiting here at 247Sports. And one of the biggest stories the last few cycles was, of course, the situation with Jaden Rashada, and you chronicled it extensively in this book. I have to say that I personally enjoyed learning more about Rashada's agent. That was a character that I didn't know, a college student who had to step out of class to take phone calls about multi-million-dollar deals. But what did you learn, John, when digging deeper into this Rashada saga?
Yeah, to me, it felt like it needed more information, right? And I think Rashada was the first, in some ways, if not the first, it was the biggest kind of recruiting story in the NIL era, just because all the details leaked out, and that chapter explains how they leaked out and the human impact on Jaden once those numbers did get out there. But one of the details that popped out the most to me was talking to the agent, where he explained to me that Hugh Hathcock, who's the super Florida booster, who's currently embroiled in this lawsuit that's playing out, told him, like, I would go up to $18 million for Jaden Rashada. So we know it as a $13.85 million deal. But the guy involved said, if you had kept pushing it, I would have gone all the way up to $18 million for one player. And so that kind of another one that's like, whoa, that's kind of a wild number. But I think, again, we keep coming back to like showing the human impact, going beyond just the headline, showing what actually happened behind the scenes. That's what I think a book can do so well. And so, like you said, the agent, he's a college student. And as soon as I found that out, I was like, I got to know more about this guy. And I got to know what it's like to be a college sophomore in the middle of the biggest story in college football. And it's still ongoing, as, Jaden Rashada is currently suing Florida head coach Billy Napier. And that's, we'll see how that plays out. But that's also a one-of-a-kind lawsuit playing out right now.
If I could just make one quick point. I mean, there's a reason the book is called The Price, because it's not just the financial windfall, the billions of dollars that have flown into and really flooded into the sport. It's the psychological and the emotional and the physical toll that's being taken every single day by people who absolutely love the game, but find themselves just battered by the cross currents and the crosswinds. And they're not just coming every week or every day. They're coming almost hourly to some of these people. And that's what you can do with a book. When you get behind the scenes, as we did, and you get the access that we did, and you have the trust that we had engendered in various precincts around the country and programs, and you bring that to life, I think for the college football fan, when you're trying to understand this chaotic world right now, I think what The Price does is really bring it front and center to you. So when you're watching a game, you're watching it with a deeper level of interest and understanding of what's actually going on off the field.
Well, with finances, everybody had their opinion on whether or not he was, quote, worth that amount of money. You both emphasized the need to tell that human part of the story. So, Armen, what emotions maybe came out for you when you were telling some of these challenging stories that we hadn't seen before?
Well, I spent a lot of time with Michigan and Jim Harbaugh in Ann Arbor and the NCAA and the saga, where both between Jim internally within the athletic department, athletic director Ward Manuel, and their, as it's been described to me, and I think it's accurate, their strained relationship, and then Jim's battle with the NCAA. And I've covered the NCAA for far too long, and there's a lot of really good people there that are doing hard work and a thankless job. But I think when people understand through the reporting what the Committee on Infractions was trying to do with Jim Harbaugh, and I think it was nothing less than a vendetta against Jim Harbaugh and against Tom Mars, his attorney. And they were going to try to make an example of Jim. And I think we saw that with the 4-year show cause penalty and the 1-year suspension where he can't coach at all. It was absolute overkill. And if you look at Jim's situation, he was squeezed on two sides. One, from a university, he's a Michigan man in heart and soul, by a university he believed that really wasn't backing him to the degree that he wanted to be backed. And on the other side, by a process that he absolutely hated, which was the investigative process. And in the end, as Tom Mars, his attorney, said to him, Jim, I told him once, I told him twice, I told him more than twice, I can't see any reason that if you get an offer from the National Football League, why you wouldn't take it, because of the way that we are situated with the Committee on Infractions. And I think that played out exactly as Tom Mars anticipated that it would. So for me to get inside that enforcement process, and which was really in some ways very duplicitous, in one hand, one assistant coach gets a 1-game suspension, a slap on the wrist, and on the other hand, for virtually the same thing that Jim was accused of lying to the investigators, and he didn't lie, he didn't remember. There's a distinction there with a difference. He gets hammered. So that process and that committee, to me, is a really important part of the book. And you go back in history with it too to understand how we got to that point. But that's what you can do in a book. You can't do that on a network television 2-minute spot, and you can't really do it sometimes in a magazine article. And when you team up with somebody like John, again, I'll give him another compliment, somebody like John who works really hard and relentlessly to get to the bottom of things, it makes for a nice combination.
I did find all of the enforcement and the committees. There's so many committees in the NCAA.
Yeah, they
I
have
found
a few
that part
committees.
Really fascinating to. Just a few, yeah. Very interesting to learn about that. I want both of your opinion on this. I feel like you're the perfect people to ask, but we'll start with John. There's always been this idea of the haves and the have-nots in this sport, but after writing this book and digging in deep, how do the have-not programs, even those in-power conferences, survive in this landscape?
Yeah, and we write a lot about in the book about Maryland, which is it's not a have-not, but it's not necessarily a have either. It's stuck in the middle, and that's a really tough spot to be in right now, where you're in the big boy club. But I think the analogy that we use is, especially with Maryland being in the Big Ten, that they're in the best neighborhood, but they have the smallest house, and so you're competing against these places that have more resources. And Mike Loxley, who I grew to really like during this process, is very candid. He tells it how it is. You can see why he's such a good recruiter. He gave me this analogy comparing it to clothing stores, which is not maybe how I ever thought of college football, but he talked about Georgia, Alabama, Michigan as like a Saks Fifth Avenue level. That Charlotte's or like a Target, and he said Maryland's Macy's, and he said the problem is you don't see a lot of Macy's anymore, and he explained it as these top programs can take some of his top talent away because they're bigger and they have more money. These lower schools can take some of his depth players because they can offer starting spots and more playing time and things like that. So it's we're kind of getting eaten from both sides, and so that's something. Those schools in the middle, they can still be Power 4. But those schools that maybe don't have all the advantages, they're at this kind of inflection point where you have to decide, can we level up? Can we invest more resources? Can we find a way to maybe get that transcendent quarterback that allows us to make a playoff run? Or do we maybe have to back off? Do we maybe have to invest more in other sports that maybe we have a better shot at competing at? So, schools like Maryland, Rutgers, Mississippi State, Indiana, you can name them in all other conferences. In some ways, they have a lot of advantages, but they have real challenges too against these bigger and better schools. And to me, I just feel like I wanted to know more about those level of schools, and I think that we were able to tell those stories and learned a lot in the process.
Yeah, Emily, for me, that's a very good question, because I think the future, that if you look into the crystal ball, it's really cloudy for those secondary Power 5, Power 4 schools now, and that's what worries me, because if we have another iteration of realignment, which I think we're going to have, and if the Big Ten and the SEC decide they want to take their ball and go play on another court or another field, who goes along with them? Who's in those SEC schools and the Big Ten schools that go into maybe a Power 64 conference? And what happens to the second tier schools, and what happens within those athletic departments if they're still forced to pay part of this $2.8 billion settlement and $20 million or so a year in revenue sharing with their athletes? I think right now, as I mentioned, there's just so much greed and so much self-interest. And until that gets put aside and people start thinking about the greater good in the future of college football, you might see some sort of Oppenheimer kind of event, cataclysmic event, where there's either a huge scandal associated with this chaos, or there's a breakaway and there's a lot of collateral damage on the back end. And I give Charlie Baker, the new president, a lot of credit. He's a very pragmatic man. He's a politician. He's tried to put some things out into the atmosphere, the D1 idea proposal that is getting bounced around, but he's a pragmatist. And he's probably, as someone said to us, he's either going to be the best NCAA president in history, or he's going to be the last NCAA president in history, as this association becomes less and less relevant as we move forward. And so, to me, long term, the powers that be, the Greg Sankeys and the Tony Petitis, and there's a guy, Bobby Robbins, who's stepping aside from Arizona as the president. It's a great loss for Arizona, but somebody getting him would be he's the solutionist. He's one of those people that's bright enough and forward thinking enough to be in that room at that table. But until they get together and figure out what's in the best interest in college football as a whole, this chaos is going to continue. And there's going to be a lot of programs that are going to not be happy with what happens afterwards.
A lot of heavy stuff in this book, but we're all looking forward to the sequel called The Solution, hopefully, where we fix all of this. But sounds like we are still very, very far away from that. So thank you both so much for chronicling this historic time in college football. Once again, you can check out The Price wherever you find books these days. Really such a fascinating read. If you're like myself and you thought that you knew the true story, there is so much more in this book. So be sure to check it out. We are gearing up here for the CBS Game of the Week, featuring our first look at the Buckeyes. But coming up next, who's on campus? The latest recruiting intel from our 247 Sports experts. High-profile prospects will hit campuses across the country this fall, and our reporters have you covered from coast to coast. Let's kick it off with Florida and Blake Alderman from Swamp 24/7 here to tell us who is on campus.
No cupcakes for Florida week 1. They've got number 19 Miami coming to the Swamp. It's a big in-state rivalry. Maybe these two teams don't play as much as what you would see in a typical rivalry game, but two teams in state squaring off is going to draw attention from guys in the state of Florida. So it's a pretty deep group of guys that are expected to be in attendance for that game. I think probably the more notable uncommitted guy in the 25 class as far as Florida's end is 4-star linebacker Ty Jackson right there out of Seminole Ridge in Loxahatchee, Florida. He's one of their top, if not the top, uncommitted target right now for Florida. Linebacker's a big position for them. They're certainly trying to flip plenty of guys right now, hoping that a season can draw some attention. Guys like Jarquez Carter, Bryce Fitzgerald, DJ Pickett, Malik Autry, those guys committed elsewhere are some names expected on the visitor list for Florida. Super deep list of guys there in the 2026 class. Top to bottom, it's a really good group of guys that are expected in there. I think that probably wide receiver, maybe edge, defensive line, and then that offensive line group are some of maybe the more notable positions of expected guys there on Florida's visitor list. So, guys like Johnny Jones, Chancellor Campbell, Micah Smith, Chancellor Barclay, Cannon Pickett, those are some of the guys on the offensive line that are expected. It's not a state that typically produces a lot of offensive linemen. So it's a little different in that 26 cycle for Florida to have so many targets right there in their backyard. So it's a really good chance for Florida or even Miami, however this game goes. It's a good chance to make an impression early on for those 2026 guys. So that's kind of the key that you want to do there. Obviously, you're trying to flip guys in 25, but really loaded group of list of names that are expected in there for Florida. So it's going to be a busy week confirming names. We'll have everything up to date on Swamp 24/7. And now let's head to Georgia to hear from Benjamin Wolk about the Bulldogs and their big game in week 1 against Clemson.
Thanks, Blake. And in Georgia's case, it's a slightly different visitors list than some other places because it's not a home game for Georgia. It's a neutral site game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Clemson. And so that's not your typical Athens game day visit, but it does give you a chance to get some guys at a Georgia game in person for that first week of the year. And so Georgia's definitely going to do that. And you've got to start with 5-star defensive lineman Justice Terry. He's going to make a signing day decision, but he's really down to 3 schools, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida State. Georgia's going to get him to Athens at some point this year too, but for him to be at week 1 when Georgia plays against Clemson in a neutral site environment, that's a big deal for the Bulldogs, and he is without a doubt the most important visitor who will be at this Georgia-Clemson game. Beyond Justice Terry in the 2025 class, some guys that I would expect to be on campus that are really important. Running backs, Usmani Kroma, and Minnesota commit Shane Marshall. Those are 2 running backs that are really high on Georgia's board for running backs coach Josh Crawford. I think that, there's a good chance that at least one of those guys ends up in Georgia's 2025 class. For them to be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium for that opener will definitely be a big deal as well. Looking at a couple of guys that are committed elsewhere, we talked about Shane Marshall. You've got Braxton Kyle, a defensive lineman that's committed to Rutgers. You've got Jeremiah McLeod, a teammate of Ousmane Kroma, who's a defensive lineman committed to Florida. Both of those guys have said that they plan on being at the Georgia-Clemson game for the opener as well. And then Georgia's really going to be looking ahead to the 2026 and 2027 classes, and they're not going to be short on star power in those recruiting cycles as well, going to be in Atlanta for the opener. In the 2026 class, you've got 5-star linebacker Tyler Atkinson out of Grayson. You're probably not going to find a bigger prospect in the 2026 class for Georgia than Atkinson. He's going to be at the Georgia-Clemson game. And then you look at the tight end position. You know that Todd Hartley is always known for getting ahead of the curve when it comes to getting tight ends. He had 2 in the 2025 class committed really early. He's already looking ahead to the 2026 and 2027 cycle. Braden Fogel in the 2026 class will be a tight end that's on a visit for the Georgia-Clemson game. And then Mark Bowman, who is going to be one of the best in the country at the tight end position from the West Coast. He's going to be in Atlanta for that game as well. So Georgia already getting ahead on the 2026 and 2027 classes, but also already in line to have a couple of huge 2025 visitors as well. All right, now over to Andrew Hattersley at Texas A&M.
Thanks, Ben. The Mike Elko era will kick off on a huge stage on Saturday night with number 7 ranked Notre Dame heading to Kyle Field. College Game Day is going to be in town, and so are several top Texas A&M targets, both in the 2025, 2026, and 2027 class. Obviously, a lot of Texas A&M current commits are going to be in town, including Kiarty Armstrong, Kelshawn Johnson, Kobe Sellers, Landon Ring, Kelvion Riggins, just to name a few who are planning to be there. And they will also have a chance to hit the ground running a little bit in the 2026 and 2027 class. A&M already has 2 commits. Markel Ford and Deuce Gilbert would expect both of them to be there. And then some of their top targets in the 2026 class are also planning to be in town, including top 247 quarterback Helaman Kasuga and Braylon Womack. Kasuga, this will be a return trip for him. He spent multiple days in College Station in June, got to work with Colin Klein, and now we'll get to see a game day atmosphere for the first time. And for Braylon Womack, this is a chance to see 2 of his top schools in Notre Dame and Texas A&M. Womack was in town at the end of July for A&M's recruiting pool party, and now he'll get the chance to also see a game day experience for the first time. There's also going to be several in-state targets in town, and Jamarian Carlton, Jalen Lott, Javion Osborne, London Smith are just a few of the 2026 targets that'll be in town. And Devontre Kirkland, who picked up an offer from Texas A&M this summer, will headline the 2027 group, and it's expected to be a strong group there as well. Texas A&M currently sitting with a top 10 class in the 2025 class. A win would do wonders for their efforts in the 2026 and 2027 class. Just a massive first opportunity for Mike Elko and his staff to leave a big impression on several big targets this upcoming weekend.
They may be a 40-point favorite, but there's still a lot to learn when the 2024 Buckeyes hit the field on Saturday. We head to Columbus next. Welcome back into the 247 Sports College Football Show, here with Dave Biddle, senior writer of Bucknuts.com, to help us preview the CBS Game of the Week between Ohio State and Akron. Dave, everybody wants to know about the quarterbacks. It sounds like Will Howard is the starter, but so much talent in that room. What do you think we'll see from that position on Saturday?
Yeah, I think Will Howard is going to play the first half, maybe the first series of the second half, and they'll get Devin Brown in there. Then, Emily, Julian Sand's going to play in this game, in my opinion. I won't be surprised if before long Julian Sand is the number 2 quarterback.
Looking forward to it. Dave, thank you so much, and thank you for watching the 247 Sports College Football Show. Enjoy the games.